Really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today here. And it is Thursday, July 6, 2017. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. And apparently Skype is giving us some grief. I guess they were a little premature to discontinue those older peer-to-peer versions because apparently the new cloud-based we see everything approach has all kinds of problems that are going on there. So we're going to try and keep this show running. We're already looking at some alternative systems. More and more remote hosts are starting to go over something Google has out there called the hosting, or Google Hosts or something like that you can do video and calls on, and it seems to be a little bit more reliable. Although some of Google's latest stuff also seems to cause problems. I had Google Earth actually crash my Windows 7 the other day, and you're scratching your head and saying, what's going on? Is it really deteriorating that rapidly? Anyway, it is Thursday. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Obviously, the big news today over at the G20, Donald Trump has finally arrived in Hungary. He did a quick stop in Warsaw, Poland yesterday, made a speech, said all kinds of things. Then now he's in Hamburg, and he's saying somewhat different things. So he's not presenting a consistent, unified information front, if you will. We'll get into that in a little bit. But there are major protests. The corporate media is describing them as anti-capitalist. No, actually, they're anti-fascist. Because the G20 is not about capitalism anymore. It is about outright global fascism. And that is a system where the money is designed to be sucked out of the pockets of the people and fed to the elites here. And apparently the protests have gone violent. There was a Porsche dealership was set fire to. And the police have unleashed water cannons and tear gas. And even the SWAT teams are out there trying to keep things under control. Now, what's going on inside the G20, there's some real interesting dynamics going on here because it almost feels like the general enthusiasm for Donald Trump is not all that high. And apparently Angela Merkel has already agreed to a free trade deal with China. And analysts are saying, yeah, this is another snub against Donald Trump. So apparently Germany meant it when they said we're partners but we're no longer friends. A while back, the EU and Japan have reached a free trade deal. And so they're all out there making deals, and they're making deals without going through the United States. Merkel has reiterated her earlier remarks. Europe can no longer rely on the United States. And Merkel basically said that EU members, Europe as a whole, can no longer rely upon Washington, and basically saying the continent must take its fate into its own hands. So we're already starting to see Europe drift away from its close relationship with the United States, maybe preparatory to a pivot toward Russia and Asia, which is obviously where the economic focus of the world is also heading to. Now, Erdogan is up there in Hamburg. He is still feeling very angry that Germany is not allowing him to speak from the podium during the G20. And he came out with this very bizarre statement, Germany is committing suicide by not allowing me to speak to the Turks. And still trying to get his little FaceTime up there. But this idea about committing suicide, it almost sounded like there's an implied threat in there that Turkey, if Erdogan does not get his time on the podium, Turkey will just open the gates and send yet more refugees pouring into Europe. Now, as you know, Crown Prince bin Salman skipped the G20 this year, sent a finance minister in his place. A lot of people wondering why. And apparently an inside source in Riyadh is saying that Crown Prince bin Salman is concerned that there might be an internal coup against him. And so he had to stay in Riyadh to try and make sure that he still has a job when the G20 is over. So it has not been the smoothest of transitions of political power. Certainly the gentleman that he replaced would like his job back. We have all these regional Saudi tribal chieftains refuse to swear allegiance to Crown Prince bin Salman. So his grip on power right now is very tenuous. The majority of the Saudi people are not on board with this warmongering against Qatar. So we'll see what's going to happen over there. Now, obviously, the big news is North Korea. And Nikki Haley is out there at the United Nations screaming about, we'll go our own path if needed. We're going to go rogue. We don't need a UN resolution to do anything. We don't need the rest of you, which basically undermines the whole point of the United Nations anyway. We're going to do a quick shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our nation. And the fear-mongering is just all the way up there. Article coming on out of Russia today. North Korea now has the capacity to target the heart of the U.S. Pacific Command, which happens to be right here on this island where I am sitting. The missile that they just tested, no. Can't quite get here, but they're trying to bang the drums that this is somehow a new threat. And there's another article out of Russia today saying U.S. threatens China and other nations trading with North Korea after the missile test. And they're out there saying that this was a tremendous provocation and it's time for denuclearization. Now, that's actually a good idea. But denuclearization only works if the whole world gets rid of their nuclear weapons, starting with the one and only nation that has actually used nuclear weapons against the civilians of another country. That, of course, being the United States itself. Now, Nikki Haley, back at the United Nations, is out there screaming that North Korea has closed off all diplomacy, and that is why the military options are on the table. Now, that is less than accurate, because it was only a few weeks ago that the U.S. State Department said they didn't want to talk to North Korea anymore. But now it's all North Korea's fault. And Nikki Haley is out there saying the U.S. is prepared to use the full range of capabilities against North Korea. She's talking about an invasion here. She's talking about an invasion to go on in. And a lot of people are pointing out that we're seeing a lot of mindless hawkishness when it comes to North Korea's missile test. And basically, it's a complex situation. Nobody has ever actually gone in and done an attack against another country to specifically deprive it of their nuclear weapons. Israel claimed they were doing that when they bombed Iraq's Osirak power station. But as it turned out, there was nothing at the power station but a power station. So nobody really knows how that might play out. No doubt by now, Kim Jong-un has dispersed all of his nuclear components all over the country. Hunting them all down and making sure that they've got them all is very, very problematic. And he does have those rockets, and he does have a lot of artillery. And so a lot of people are saying this is really not a good idea. Piers Morgan is out there directing Donald Trump. You've been sorely tested, but it's time to hold your nerve and your trigger, Mr. President. If you attack North Korea, you'll drag us all into catastrophe. And yes, that is absolutely true. Another article along the same line, this is from antiwar.com. Even a U.S. surgical strike against North Korea could lead to a full-scale war. Because let's say they go on in and they do a decap strike against Kim Jong-un. If they miss, what is Kim Jong-un going to do? If they actually get Kim Jong-un, who's going to take over for him? He's got a lot of hardliners around him. It's like the situation with Assad. You could easily wind up with somebody much, much worse if you do a decapitation strike. Now, according to U.S. author Michael Springman, in an interview on Press TV, he's saying North Korea is not going to back down. They will not be intimidated by U.S. threats. And again, this gets back in that Asian culture and the importance of face. And that is something that is not adequately being considered in all of this rhetoric against North Korea. That culturally they are not going to back down. In fact, what may be going on is North Korea may be forcing the U.S. back to the negotiating table because the U.S. is in this position of not having an easy target this time militarily of potential blowback that could seriously damage the region. And despite Nikki Haley saying we're not going to talk to them, this could be Kim Jong-un is just trying to bluff them back to the negotiating table. And what he's going to ask for is the same thing Russia and China. Stop putting weapons on our borders. Stop sailing your war machines up and down alongside of our coast, and we'll back off. Stop acting like you're going to invade us, and we will stop preparing to defend ourselves from invasion, which makes a lot of sense. Now, there is a fly in the ointment. Everybody's been talking about what does North Korea even have that is of that much importance. And, of course, there's $1 trillion worth of rare earth minerals, all kinds of mineral riches. But there's also the opium. And right now, the North Korean opium is competing with the CIA's Afghan opium. And so the CIA would love to get in there to North Korea and take over its opium fields the same way they did in Afghanistan, because then they would have a monopoly on the opium traffic all over the globe. And that is another factor that's going wild. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Tony in Puerto Rico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Tony, are you there? There you are.
Yeah, do you hear me?
I can hear you now. I hear you now.
Okay. Aloha, Mike.
Aloha.
I have a quick comment and a comparison. And forgive me if I don't make any sense. Okay, I want to change the subject a little bit. I want to compare JFK with Donald Trump and why they took out JFK and they will never take out Donald Trump. Because JFK was Irish Catholic and Donald Trump is an Anglo-Saxon non-Catholic. What do you think?
I don't think that's that much of a factor. If Donald Trump defies the deep state past a certain point, yes, they will assassinate him. And I'm sure he's already aware of that, and that's why he's got his own private security working in coordination with the Secret Service Protective Detail. The idea of assassinating somebody because of their religion, there's no gain for that. Okay, the reason they took out John F. Kennedy, he was a threat to the CIA's interventions. He was a threat to the Federal Reserve's profitability. He was a threat to the Texas oil billionaires' profitability. He was talking about getting out of some of these wars. In fact, Kennedy wanted to call off the race to the moon in favor of having a joint Soviet-U.S. mission to the moon, which would have saved both countries a lot of money. And so Kennedy was really out there trying to do what he thought was best for the country as a whole, and those who believed that the country only exists to bring them wealth and power finally reached a breaking point and decided to take him out. And the same thing could happen with Donald Trump. And that may be the reason why he's reversed himself on some of his major policies, such as the wars of intervention and trying to prosecute Hillary Clinton.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you, Tony. We're going to switch over to Keith in Montana. Keith, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, you know, Mike, every time I hear about these threats, whether it's North Korea, Russia, Syria, like that, I can only think back to like when we were kids young. How much money do you think has been put into defense in the last 50 some odd years to where some other nation, and this doesn't just apply to the United States, but their allied partners, how many billions and billions or trillions of dollars have been put into defense, and they still come up with this thing that this country's a threat, this country's a threat. It's like scalping people all the time.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing, and Eisenhower did warn America about that. The military-industrial complex becoming so powerful and so wealthy, they literally skew the political system to continue to serve themselves. And that means there will always be more wars because they need to use up all the old weapons before they can soak the taxpayer for new weapons.
Yeah, like I say, every time I hear that, I just think of the trillions of dollars that the Pentagon has lost, and it's like, well, what about these so-called intercontinental ballistic missiles and this intercepting programs that they have? You mean to tell me that they haven't got enough, you know? Anyway, other than that, I was going to tell you, you sure missed a good morning this morning when we had that nice quake over here.
Yeah, we were going to talk about that later on because a lot of people are very nervous. There's been a heightened quake activity around Yellowstone, and yes, this quake was 150 miles away from it, but it's actually on that same line as that swarm of smaller quakes that's been affecting the area recently. So we're going to talk about that later in the show.
All right, yeah, I was just going to highlight one thing. I was on Dutch Cinch last night on YouTube there, but people from all over were recording it from Spokane and everything, down into Idaho, and even up in northern Canada. that European station that registered as a 7.0, and it felt big, but their Quake so-called map doesn't look like it took into consideration all the area, you know.
Well, it's really hard to get an accurate read, especially on the automated system, which is why we don't really look at that final magnitude until it's been reviewed by a human seismologist, because very often that automated system can make mistakes. It can get false positives. Somebody trips over a seismographic sensor, and all of a sudden they're saying, oh, there was a magnitude 22 quake here, but nobody felt anything. So it does have to be sort of verified, and that's why the numbers will usually change a little bit afterwards.
All right. Well, hey, my best to you and Claire, okay?
All right, thanks an awful lot. We'll be talking to you. Now, getting on back to the situation with North Korea. Article coming out of the Express in Great Britain. Alaska and Hawaii preparing for nuclear war after North Korean missile shocks officials. And they're talking about our current missile defense system, where they have 36 missile interceptors in underground silos on military bases in Alaska and California. None here. There used to be a Nike base out toward Electric Bay, but it's been converted into a solar observatory. So we don't actually have that. We do have a harbor full of Aegis ships that are carrying standard missiles and radars. That should, in theory, be a very potent defense here. Mostly what this article is about is a beg for more money. And Senator Brian Schatz is out there saying, oh, yes, we have to spend more money on weapons, and this will help defend Hawaii, Alaska, and the U.S. against the North Korean ballistic missile threat. And basically the bill is going to mean an extra 28 ground-based interceptors, 14 of them in Alaska. And they're saying, hopefully this will stop the nuclear threat. That word worries me. Hopefully. Hopefully. For that much money, I'd like a little more certainty. Now, frankly, they're just using this missile test to soak the taxpayer for more military budget and to justify an aggression against North Korea, because the missile North Korea tested early this week is not their longest-reaching missile. It's actually in third place behind the Yunha-3 and the KN-14. Which can reach 10,000 and 8,000 kilometers respectively. And up at the United Nations, the Russian delegation is saying, by their measure, this North Korean missile does not really qualify as an ICBM. It's a mid-range missile. And everybody's just trying to crank this all up into North Korea as being aggressive and North Korea as being bad. North Korea is preparing to defend or deter a U.S. invasion, because for the last going on 2 decades, the U.S. has been invading and regime changing and drone striking and all over the world. Everybody knows who the bad guy is here. Now, over at Fox News, Jesse Waters, who's co-host of the Fox News show The Five, thinks that Kim Jong-un needs to be assassinated or overthrown. So they're talking about regime change again over there on Fox News. Okay, Jesse, here's your rifle, here's your parachute. Go have fun. Now, Pakistan just test-fired a nuclear-capable ballistic missile. Just a big yawn coming from the corporate media. Big yawn coming from the State Department. Oh, who cares about Pakistan? Actually, Pakistan is closer to a real nuclear exchange than North Korea is because of the ongoing friction with India. And there's that standoff between India and China as well. That's a real flashpoint. Okay, we're coming up here on a commercial break. When we come on back, new developments in Libya, other countries in all these different war zones. So we'll be back after these few words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, the good news is all this fear-mongering regarding North Korea doesn't really seem to be working. A member just put up a story. Apparently, a survey is showing that the majority of the millennials, 70%, think the student loan debt problem is a bigger threat than anything coming from North Korea. And I would tend to agree. We're going to go to the telephones now. Mike in Alaska, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Calling you from the cabin here. I'm still not buying it. Like I said yesterday, something people don't think about is how much nuclear damage has been self-inflicted damage in Alaska. type in Operation Chariot, Edward Teller. He wanted to test hydrogen bombs way up near Prudhoe Bay area up on the Arctic Ocean and create a harbor by blowing out all the ice. It's the craziest thing if you read it, the plan that he had. And they wanted to do it, and they didn't even want to move the indigenous people away from the blast sites. They said, don't worry about it. The Arctic wind will blow the radiation out to ocean.
Well, actually, as I recall that project, and this was part of the what was called the Atoms for Peace program, where they wanted to show that nuclear weapons had other uses than blowing up Hiroshima and Nagasaki, because there was a huge pushback in the American people against these weapons. They were afraid of them just getting out of control. And so the idea was that properly placed, a nuclear weapon could blast a new artificial harbor in a coastline, and all the debris would fall back down onto the bomb, trapping the radiation where it would be safe underground and never come on out. It was a stupid idea. We know from fracking that was not going to work. We know from the leaking coming out of Fukushima that was not going to work. But it was actually more propaganda than it was a real plan, because they were trying to convince the American people that, nuclear weapons were really okay, and we're going to find things to do with them outside of destroying cities. And there was the Atoms for Peace, the Harbor Project. There was actually an attempt to create a rocket that was fueled with a nuclear reactor. I think that was called Project Orion, but I'm not sure about that one. And all of these, again, they were to try and convince the American people this was a technology we could all peacefully coexist with. And like that duck and cover Bert the Turtle propaganda film, that's all it was, propaganda. You can survive a nuclear attack. Well, no, not really. Pulling a picnic cloth over your head is not going to really be effective in the event of a real nuclear attack. So that was where that whole idea came from. But yeah, with all the atmospheric testing that's been done, that radiation is still floating around up there. We know Hanford is the most contaminated area in the world. Now they've got concerns over San Onofre. Fukushima is still leaking. Chernobyl, they had to build a whole new shield over it because the old one started leaking. And yeah, we have made a real mess because we did not have respect for the downside of the technology.
Mike, I went out to Nome a few years ago. That's really where you can see Russia from.
Yes.
And they have a DEW line out there, that direct early warning, and that's 1950s. These huge dishes, they're all over Alaska, and
yes,
it's supposed to line of sight warning system for an incoming. But they use something inside of these facilities. I think it's tritium. It's leaking into the groundwater. It's poisoning the local water supply. They've been defunct. They did a lot of rehabilitation in the 90s, but for many decades, people, they were getting the sites were not in use, and they leaked. And so no Russian bombers came. I'm not anti-defense, but no Russian bombers came, but a lot of this stuff leaked. We've had a lot of incidences. Some of the bases also had nuclear power on site
because they
in case of an attack.
Yeah, the RTGs, the early RTGs. I'm trying to figure out what they would use tritium for in a radar installation in the first place. I mean, it's the most expensive material on Earth. Far more valuable per gram of material than gold, silver, or platinum. And it's very expensive, very difficult to come by. It's used in expensive watch dials and gun sights in microscopic amounts. Anyway, Mike, going to let you go here. Got to take another break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And going on back to Mike in Alaska's concerns. First of all, there just isn't that much tritium in the world. It's very difficult to come by. It has a half-life of just 12 years. So if all of this was happening back in the 1960s, 1970s, there's very little of it left. It decomposes into helium-3, which is a neutron absorber. Before we leave off the subject, though, I'm sure you've all heard of HAARP, the High Altitude Auroral Research Project, and there's been a lot of nonsense put out about it, how it's a weather control device and all the rest of it. Actually, no. Looking at the facility and the antenna array, it looks like it was an attempt to develop a radar that could see over the horizon by bouncing the radar beam off the ionosphere. And I don't know if they ever got it to work or not, but in any event, space-based radars have rendered the whole concept obsolete at this point. We're going to go back to the telephones now. Mike in Kentucky, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I've seen the tape where the Air Force was talking about being decommissioned and how they couldn't find any more customers from universities and how they used it to, quote, manage the ionosphere. But that, whatever that might imply, manage the ionosphere.
That's a bit of a long one there because, the ionosphere, of course, is controlled by solar radiation. Anybody who listens to shortwave knows that.
Right. Well, they could supposedly create a glowing or a fake aurora effect with it, but it's just exciting. The particles up in the thermosphere, ionosphere is not. I don't know that they were able to do much with it, and that's why it's being defunded. I mean, I think if it could do anything, or they had technology that could be used with that, then it would still have funding. But none of the universities are wanting to do anything with it, and so their project is done. I mean, so it's in a harsh environment. It's hard to maintain. A lot of costs associated with keeping that thing functioning.
Yes, very much so.
There's other arrays, and I think in Peru and other places for people to go do research with the same sort of thing. So it became redundant and unnecessary. It's out of the way location. So, but I called about I grew up probably less than 6 air miles from a low-level nuclear waste dump. And, of course, it's the stuff of local legends. And they, at one point, had open trenches for the water to, the contaminated runoff water to evaporate from. And there's books been written about it where supposedly they actually thought it would be healthy for people to be exposed to some tritium and low-level nuclear waste would help their immune systems fight off cancer, and it's a little bit nutty.
Yeah, it was quackery. I mean, but there actually used to be these water jugs that you would buy that you'd put the water in there, and it would be exposed to radiation, and then you would drink the water. Now, in this case, it was a harmless piece of quackery. The only risk was being close to the radioisotope itself because the water didn't pick up any radiation. It was a scam. It's just plain and simple. But again, a lot of this idea that radiation could be good for you was coming out of this propaganda campaign to convince Americans to just sort of step back and let the government go on playing with these very, very large bombs.
The place I'm talking about is a place called Maxey Flats. It was opened up in the late 50s, early 60s, and it ran through into the mid-1970s. It's considered going to have to be monitored in perpetuity. They bought out dairy farmers, and of course the local dairy, I have to wonder if it didn't get contaminated. There's stories from multiple people that I've talked to that worked there that they would drive nearly new construction equipment off of an enclosed trailer into a pit, perfectly good, backhoes and bulldozers and things like that, and just bury them in the dirt because they were contaminated from some other site. Now, to me, that doesn't sound like it's low-level waste. I guess, you get career risk.
It doesn't. I mean, anything that is, yeah, I've heard stories like that.
When they're doing this.
Yeah, I've heard the same story. Brand new construction equipment gets exposed, and they just bury it. I think I mentioned the story about this really terrible John Wayne movie called The Conqueror, where they, for some reason, thought he could play Genghis Khan. And they shot part of the film out there in the New Mexico test grounds. And again, this was part of the U.S. government's propaganda campaign to convince Americans that the bombs were safe, that you didn't need to worry about radiation. And they went on out there and they shot the exteriors. And then they brought truckloads of the soil there back to the studio to put on the soundstage floor to match the look for the inside the tent shots. And half the cast and crew eventually died of cancers, including John Wayne himself, and they had to dismantle that soundstage and bury that as well.
Jeez. Wow. But this place, there's people that, I guess, that work there. They didn't hire the best and the brightest from this area. And I've talked to medical records people that worked in the medical records for the local hospital, and they said that they thought it might have been located here because of already naturally occurring weird cancers and reproductive cancers in the people that settled in the area. And there's been a rash of a small cluster of things like brain-eating amoebas that have showed up in recent years, and there's a statistical higher occurrence of rare autistic type disorders and birth defects in Amish people that live there nearby. It was located very short distance away from a river watershed, but yet, and that river goes to the northwest, but yet the weather, of course, comes in from the west and blows east. So there's a guy that claimed he was going to send me a map that showed that the tritium was detected in Dayton, Ohio, in the aquifer from this nuclear waste dump on the south side of the Ohio River, and it had contaminated downward into the earth that far that the aquifer, had carried this only explained source of tritium, whatever that is, 140 miles to the north. So obviously it's all around underneath the in the mineral water. And like I said, it's a literal cover-up. I did a Being Live local mosaic of this place. When I realized it was blocked by Google Earth, I went in there and did a mosaic of the imagery of it, and I pasted the high school football field at the same scale next to it to show the place is 4 times bigger than the local high school, its football field, the grade school, and the middle school all combined with the vocational school. This place is 4 times bigger than that. It's under a tarp, and what they've decided to do now is to put 6 feet of clay on it, and then put a vegetative cap so it won't show up on Being Live Local anymore. It's a literal cover-up. I mean,
well, it generally is there. I mean, my question would be, was there an earlier history of nuclear activity in the area? Because during the Manhattan Project, it's only coming out now. There was a lot of work that was being done in these remote laboratories, and they were basically abandoned and covered over, and nobody even knew they were there. And then decades later, housing developments were built on top of them. And then everybody starts getting sick, and they say, "Oh, didn't we mention back in the 1940s there was a bit of a bomb factory there?" Now, for those who don't understand, when we talk about tritium, we're talking about a radioactive isotope of the gas hydrogen. And hydrogen comes in 3 forms: protium, which is the natural hydrogen that you will see mixed with oxygen makes water. Then there's deuterium, where you have, protium is 1 proton and 1 electron orbiting around. Deuterium adds 1 neutron, and tritium has 2 neutrons, and that's what makes it radioactive.
Helium-3, though, you would think, I guess it must be unusable because they're talking about trying to get to the moon to get helium-3. You would think if it deteriorates to helium-3 that would be something to figure out, how to make that usable, but kind of a rabbit trail.
Yeah, supposedly there's a potential source for energy there, but yeah, you can get helium-3 from decayed tritium, and you can separate the two very easily with just a piece of lithium. It's just the right size where the tritium will go through and the helium-3 will not. And so you could, but again, it's very expensive stuff. And if they think they're going to find it in huge quantities on the moon, I don't know. That sounds more like science fiction than science fact.
It does. We've got a local space science center who's they're trying to look for water on the moon. They have an ice cube satellite. It's kind of public relations, I think, and got youngsters enthusiastic about space exploration. Nothing wrong with that.
No, nothing wrong with that. And there is water on the moon. There is water on the moon.
It migrates. It's weird how it migrates from crater to the poles, and they're looking at trying to figure that out. But the Oak Ridge facility is huge. Of course, that was one of the things that concerned Oppenheimer. But the people in the scientific community pointed out, hey, you've created a monster here. This place that they're building is not to build a few bombs to end the war, but to build tens of thousands. And so they've lost no telling how much plutonium there that probably got diverted to Israel. And the Paducah Gaseous Diffusion Plant in western Kentucky is a Superfund site that's also going to have to be monitored in perpetuity and a mess. And, of course, my thinking after Fukushima was, gee, how much do we have sitting around at these 90 currently licensed facilities, and a bunch of them that have been mothballed, because each, is, for my understanding, is for 6 years these rods have to be cooled after they're taken out of the reactor core, because they don't want to burn them more than 1.5 to 2 years. So you've got a mathematical problem where these rods keep building up. And if you, do you remember Space 1999?
Yeah, I remember it. And they were going to ship it all to the moon, and there was a big, whoopsie. Oh, I guess that didn't work out too well. The problem is that the U.S. loves fission-type uranium reactors because you get bomb stuff out of them. Other countries are already starting to move into thorium cycle reactors with a tremendous amount of success.
Wow.
But again, nobody's ever dealt responsibly with the waste buildup. And after the fuel rods are used up and can't be used for the power station anymore, they're still generating heat from decay from the isotopes that are inside. That's why they have to be cooled, because if they're just left out there, they will quickly reach a temperature where they'll spontaneously combust, and you're going to have radioactive smoke all over the place. It really is a mess. And nobody has really come up with a way to deal with this. There was, what was that, WIP facility that they were trying to do some of the stuff down there, and they had a collapse and a radiation issue down there. The planet is a mess. And it's all because of the people who push for war. They say, I want the big bomb, and I don't care what the after effects are 50, 100 years down the road. I'll just, I'll be dead and gone and just be a statue in a military park.
Did you ever watch CNN in the early 90s much? They had 4-hour news cycles, and I was about to graduate college then, and I watched for almost 2 days. Every 4 hours there would be a report that came up about this guy who had took the hot slag coming out of steel mills, and I guess they kept it hot enough. They were dropping the fuel pellets into that slag and letting it congeal, and you had an inert block of stuff you could move around with a forklift. And the fuel the fuel pellets, I guess somehow they kept them spaced far enough apart to where they didn't cause criticality. And it was nothing ever. It was like the whiz bang technology. We know what we're doing to get rid of it. And I've heard there's organized crime involved in this, and it's a tremendous moneymaker. So they don't want to get rid of it. The whole thing during the Cold War was the Soviet Union has a doomsday weapon. If we can't attack them because they got a doomsday weapon, wasn't that in Dr. Strangelove? It was
in Dr. Strangelove, yes.
But this is all sitting around now. How dare anybody cause an extended period of chaos in the United States, electromagnetic pulse weapon? We're kind of holding the world hostage, us and I guess France and some of these other countries that have these big piles of poison sitting around. There's several in Canada. The fallout from that, if the grid goes down, you've seen the estimates and the studies that 90% of the population would be dead in a year. What about the rest of the planet? If nobody can maintain the generators and the cooling pumps, you get Fukushima after Fukushima after Fukushima chain reaction.
Yes. We're
holding the world hostage with this stuff. We need to own up to it and do something about it.
Well, the whole world needs to do something about it, and I think it's just we have to abandon fission reactors as a power source. And we have to sort of break this idea that, we're going to tolerate these very dangerous, very toxic systems of energy creation simply because the military gets stuff out of it that goes bang. The military already has enough stuff that goes bang. And but yeah, it is a mess, and nobody's got a solution. But you're absolutely...
It's almost like a Fermi field. Do you know about the Fermi paradox, where they look at, gee, where's all the space aliens? There must be some kind of a filter that's killing off advanced civilizations. I almost think this is...
You're right. Yeah, you're right. This could be it. Civilizations don't last forever. They get into a nuclear fission. They poison their planet that way, or they start tinkering with their own life code, and they have an extinction level event that could very easily explain it. Or, very simply, it may turn out Einstein was right, and the speed of light really is a barrier that cannot be broken by other than very tiny subatomic particles.
Mm-hmm. Now, China just did some kind of crazy thing with quantum mechanics where they were controlling particles remotely several hundred miles away, and it was supposed to be some big breakthrough.
Quantum mechanics that is weird stuff. I mean, some of those experiments, and it just lets you know there's something else going on with the universe beyond the Einsteinian Newtonian vision. There's something else out there. There's a system
Why
of
else?
connections.
Why else would they spend so much money or resources on CERN unless they've got some reasonable suspicion that they could find gravitrons or particles that would, unify things in a theory like that?
Well,
there's got to be.
Well, they're spending a lot of money on it because they're hoping that they are going to find something. I don't know if they're actually finding new particles or they're creating them in the intense energies in these reactors. According to Einstein's theory of gravity, you don't really need a graviton when you're dealing with the curvature of space-time itself. But I know they want to find a graviton, they want to find a magnetic monopole, they want to do all the rest of it. But I think general relativity should be expanded into magnetism as well. In an additional obvious dimension because of the polarity of magnets versus the monopole of gravity. Anyway, we've wandered off into science way too much.
The global warming thing has to be considered with CERN too, because they showed that cosmic rays affect cloud formation too. So
we talked about that.
We're very vindicated about that.
We're going to be talking about global warming later on in the show because a lot of interesting developments. Got to let you go for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and I apologize that we wandered off into the science realm a little bit to the expense of current events and current news here. Now, down in Libya, the Libyan National Army claims to have liberated Benghazi. And Benghazi has been a major focal point of the ongoing war between the people of Libya to reclaim their country from foreign puppet rule and those who want to reimpose that foreign puppet rule back onto the people of Libya. So that's the latest development down there as well. The Syrian Kurds are expecting war with Turkey within days. Things are heating up over there, and apparently over at the European Union, they're now ending all talks about Turkey becoming part of the European Union. So Turkey is definitely pivoting away. They're pivoting toward Russia, and they have become a loose cannon on deck over there in the Middle East. Now, the chairman of the inquiry into the war in Iraq over at Britain, Chilcot, in an interview with the BBC, came right on out and said that Tony Blair basically lied to the people of Great Britain to get them to go along with the invasion of Iraq. No surprise to those of us who've been following along for quite some time. And apparently up in Afghanistan, SAS soldiers are suspected, there's no proof, suspected of executing unarmed Afghans and covering up potential war crimes. This looks to me like a propaganda run-up to justify a new surge into Afghanistan, which will work as wonderfully well as the old surge into Afghanistan. I think it was Einstein who said insanity is repeating the same behavior over and over and expecting a different outcome. Down in Israel, apparently a whole bunch of their rabbis are now on this campaign to ask settlers in the West Bank, illegal settlements, to poison Palestinian water sources so they can take their lands and destroy their property. And again, the settlements are illegal. And if you look at that so-called security barrier, it doesn't follow the green line exactly. In fact, it weaves around to try and separate the Palestinians from their family farmlands and sources of water. That's how it was designed to do. And other countries are really getting fed up with all of this stuff. Down in South Africa, their ruling party, the African National Congress, has decided they're going to downgrade their political ties with Israel. Political ties with Israel, rather. So, I think it's about time here. Now, of course, we're seeing all this stuff going on at the G20. There's all the protesters that are out there. And by the way, the corporate media is now trying to imply that all the violent protesters in the streets are there to protest Donald Trump. They don't have a problem with fascism and banker greed and the rest of it. They're just there to protest Donald Trump. So they're trying to lay the blame for that on him as well. But we're seeing the signs of an empire in decline. And I'm not the only one. Over at Zero Hedge, they have an article, The Twilight of Unipolar American Power. And it starts out with a reminder that back in all right, we're going to take station identification, and we'll be back with this story. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So we're talking about this article that came out over at Zero Hedge, The Twilight of Unipolar American Power. And it does look like it. I mean, following the end of World War II, the United States was pretty much it. And yes, there were rival superpowers that were growing. But especially since the fall of the Soviet Union, everyone sort of just accepted the United States was the world's only remaining superpower, and it's fading, like the Roman Empire. So this article basically starts with a reminder. Back in 1962, the former U.S. Secretary of State Dean Acheson quipped Britain had lost an empire and yet has to find a role, and the same thing could be said of the United States right now. It's losing its hegemonic domination of the global economy. It has lost much of its manufacturing. And nobody wants our GMO agriculture. What is a nation to do? It is clear that this nation, this government, is on the way out. The only question is, will it go with a bang or a whimper? And unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be a bang, which is what the bankers want. The more war, the more profit for the bankers here. Now, Trump, in his speech in Hamburg, has reaffirmed America's commitment to NATO's Mutual Defense Pact, and in particular that article that says an attack on one NATO nation is an attack on them all. And he's out there criticizing Russia. He's saying that Russia's behavior is destabilizing. Talk about the pot calling the kettle black. Now, he has backed off this idea that Russia interfered with the last year's elections, and apparently it is not on the agenda for the coming meeting between Trump and Putin over much screaming by the Russia-bashing contingent of the White House. And actually, when Trump was giving his speech in Poland, he said other people in countries could also have been trying to influence the U.S. elections. Yeah, like Israel. Everybody knows Israel's tampering with our politics on a constant basis. And Hillary. Everyone's trying to find a connection that Russia hacked the U.S. election. Why are they not devoting the same energy and intensity to investigating Hillary? They still haven't found any solid evidence of any kind of collusion between Trump and Russia. Meanwhile, more details are coming out about John Podesta, Hillary's campaign chief, and his ties with Russia. And apparently during a heated Fox Business interview with Maria Bartiromo, Hillary Clinton's former campaign chief Podesta made a series of misleading statements about his involvement in a company that received $35 million from the Russian government while Clinton was serving as Secretary of State. And even the New York Post is out there saying it's time to investigate John Podesta's Russian tie. And I agree, and it is time to investigate that Uranium One deal. It's time to investigate the quid pro quo over at the Clinton Foundation, the pay for play. It is just absolutely galling how the system is trying to find any little tiny thing they can use to attack Donald Trump when there is this huge, gigantic pile of evidence of wrongdoing by the Clintons and Obama, Loretta Lynch, James Comey, and everyone's just saying, no, I don't see it, I don't hear it, you can't make me, nya. Now, former CIA analyst Fred Fleets, in an interview on Fox News, basically said that the U.S. intelligence report that blames Russia for hacking the election was created by a hand-picked group of 12 analysts. They don't have any evidence. Basically, he's come on out and said these were pro-Obama intelligence officials, and they simply fabricated the report. Because that's what intelligence agencies do. They lie to you. And by the way, the federal government, federal investigators still cannot get their hands on the DNC server that was claimed to have been hacked by Russia. Now, a little bit of bad news. Representative Steve Scalise is back in intensive care. He'd been out of intensive care following his shooting, and he was in fair condition. Now he's been downgraded to serious. Apparently, he's developed a very serious infection, which suggests that maybe when they were operating on him, that they didn't really get all the refuse or waste material out of his abdomen that they should have. And so now they've got him in intensive care. So it's unfortunately not looking good at the moment here. Now, Brett Steffens, who is a never-Trumper, is out there declaring that all supporters of the president are idiots and bigots. And then he goes on to say that you should admire the elites. Can you hear the arrogance in this man? We are the elite. Don't question us. Don't doubt us. You should just admire us. Kneel before Zod. I'm going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now then, I have a question for Brett Steffens, who wants us all to admire the elites, of which he clearly sees himself as one. When do the elites start acting admirably? One admires people who are acting admirably. We don't admire elites who are clearly elitists and think that they should just decide how the world should be for the rest of us. And that is not democracy, and that is not the United States of America. Sarah Sanders came out with a really cute comment about CNN, saying that on Independence Day, instead of lighting fireworks, CNN blew up the last remaining shard of credibility. And they're still getting all this fallout over their attempt to blackmail this Reddit poster, over this spoof video of Trump body slamming CNN at a wrestling event. And then it turned out they targeted the wrong guy. Then it turned out that what they had done was illegal under both New York law and Georgia law. And Trump has come on out on this, saying that he thinks they've hurt themselves badly. And he's absolutely right. CNN has really shot itself in the foot. And now they're going to double down. Because now CNN is out there saying they have heard word of damning transcripts of Kushner and Bannon making deals with Russia. And, of course, CNN doesn't actually have these transcripts. And, by the way, a transcript doesn't mean the phone call actually took place. You can make up a transcript. But CNN is saying that they have inside sources who've seen somebody who claims that they've seen this transcript of these conversations that absolutely prove that there's collusion between Russia and Donald Trump. They're still out there. CNN's Jim Acosta apparently accused Donald Trump of spreading fake news by pointing out that only 3 or 4 intelligence agencies, and not all 17, claim Russia interfered with the 2016 election. Now, obviously, Jim Acosta has missed the recent articles in the New York Times and Associated Press in which they have retracted that very story of 17 U.S. intelligence agencies claiming Russia interfered in the 2016 election. So once again, CNN has egg all over its face, turning themselves into an omelet. Now, over at Zero Hedge, they have an article that should serve as a warning to all of us here in the independent media. After failing to prove the Trump-Russia collusion, Democrats are now setting their sights on pro-Trump websites. And we know it's not just the Democrats, it's also the corporate media as a whole. They're basically smarting over the fact that a bunch of independent media websites with no money whatsoever were able to overcome the corporate media cheerleading sessions for Hillary Clinton last year on CNN, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, CBS, the Washington Post, New York Times, etc., ad infinitum, ad nauseum. And so now they're on the warpath, hacking our servers, more importantly, trying to attack our credibility. And this is where we go on back to how Alex Jones basically got suckered with this interview in which this individual claimed that American pedophiles had established a secret human colony on Mars where they were keeping these pedophile children prisoner, blah, 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 blah. Nonsensical, completely nonsensical. And Alex Jones would have been well advised to express his skepticism, and he didn't. And to nobody's surprise, it's now all over the corporate media. Oh, Alex Jones thinks pedophiles have, set up a colony on the moon. And when Alex Jones fell for that, the Pizzagate Comet ping pong, that turned out there was nothing there. And I tried to communicate with him and warn him. I say, it smells like a setup. And we need to be careful because they're trying to set us up. They're trying to get us to run fake news. They're just pouring on out there. They're trying to find a way to discredit the independent media. There's no way the corporate media can get their credibility back. All they can do is try and shatter ours to level the playing field. And so it comes as no surprise that my inbox on my mail application is just full of all these stories about how the Apollo moon landings were fake. Stanley Kubrick even admitted it in this film interview, and that one's all over the web right now. And by the way, I did briefly work with Stanley Kubrick during my time in Hollywood. That is not him. It's a look-alike, but it is not him. So that's out there. Hollow Earth is out there. They're out there just trying to junk up. The process is called kookification, and that's actually a term of craft in propaganda circles. Kookification. Plant something on them that makes them look like a nutcase so people will just turn away. And so everybody who's in the independent media, myself, RBN, hopefully Alex Jones, and the rest, we have to be very careful. We have to be more professional than the professional media people. We have to vet our sources. We have to double check. We have to have independent confirmation on this stuff. And understand that people that we may think we know and trust for years may turn out to be working against us. So we have to be very, very careful. One good example is the story that was circulating around that 31 states had refused to give voter info. Now, according to Chris Kobach, who's the vice chair of the Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity, is saying right now only 14 states are withholding that voting data. Not 31, not 41, only 14, 4. And so, but again, those states are obviously afraid of something. And on the original list of states that were withholding the data, most of them were Democratic strongholds. Okay, we already got that. Now, talking about influencing the media, one of the ways the corporate media is trying to rebuild, remanufacture its credibility is basically going through a song and dance that says, we're going to do a better job, we're going to start checking ourselves more carefully. Well, you should have been checking yourself all along, but that's another story entirely. Now, apparently, Soros has dropped $500,000 on a fact-checking organization over in Great Britain, the Open Society Foundation and Omidyar Network, to produce new tools to counter what it calls misinformation, and these tools are going to be made available to the corporate media to make sure that viewers of corporate media never see any double plus ungood news as decided upon by George Soros and his people. Somehow, I don't think that's going to reassure anybody that they're getting the truth and the facts from the corporate media. Remember, one of the signals that the Soviet Union was about to come down was when the Soviet citizens stopped reading Pravda and Izvestia because they just knew it was nothing but lies and propaganda. The same thing is being repeated right now with our corporate media. And the Soviet Union did have their version of the independent media called the Samizdat. And it wasn't on video and internet radio. Back then, it was all being done with fax machines. But it proved to be just as effective. Meanwhile, over at the New York Slimes, apparently on Tuesday, they had a quote from a parody North Korea Twitter account, and the New York Times reported it was an actual statement from the North Korean government. They're not checking. They're just looking for anything that can be used to inflame public opinion against North Korea, and they ran a statement from a parody North Korea Twitter account as an actual official statement from North Korea. That's getting out there pretty desperate. And Glenn Beck apparently has come on out and said the corporate media isn't interested in facts and truth anymore. They literally have accepted a new role of promoting the leftist globalist agenda. And that's their job, to propagandize you. As Mika Brzezinski said on MSNBC, the job of the corporate media is to control what you think. Now, are you comfortable with the idea of having what you think under somebody else's control? I'm certainly not. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Brendan in San Francisco, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I wanted to take advantage of this meme wars and just tell you what a pleasure it's been to finally have a laugh about something, like on a gut level. I've just been loving it with all the stress and all the tension and all the nonsense. To actually be able to genuinely enjoy something and have a great laugh, it's been a wonderful thing. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
So, I mean, what have you? Please tell me you've gotten a chuckle out of it, because things are just getting so hot.
Yeah, there's actually more and more to laugh about these days on several different fronts.
Yeah. Well, you do see a bit of a turn, and it's like they're giving Trump like an inch here and there, where they were just, you know, sorry, I'm driving through a construction zone right now, but they've actually been giving him a little bit of an inch, and maybe the tide is finally turning, because you can't deny the fact that he won in a landslide, and these people didn't just go off the planet Earth. They're still here, and they're still consuming news and information. So I forget who said it, but somebody was suggesting that the mainstream media is finally saying, "Man, we're gonna go broke if we don't modify our behavior," I guess.
Well, I would like to see that happen, but again, we had that comment that came out that CNN it basically sees the majority of their remaining audience among the liberal Democrats, and it sees its way to profitability and increased viewership by basically pandering to the fantasy that Donald Trump stole the election from Hillary. In other words, they're just telling their audience what they think their audience wants to hear, and that's going to get them by for a little while. But at some point, somebody in the corporate media is going to have to break ranks and say, we need to stop being political advocates. We were never supposed to be political advocates. We need to go back to basically serving in our traditional role as watchdog on government abuse. That's what needs to happen.
Right.
Unfortunately, the people signing all those paychecks don't want to see that happen. We're still in the middle of a huge fight for the minds of the American people.
Right, and I've thought a lot about this, Mike. After listening to the show, I really played this through my head and tried to come up with, thoughts and ideas that are a little bit off the mainstream. But I think Trump really needs to throw them a bone. For example, pardon Snowden. Get that other Navy submariner out of jail. Like, throw these folks a bone and just see how they react.
Well, I'm sorry. Who do you mean these folks? I'm not clear on that.
Okay, so I think we would agree that, and in fact, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I agree with CNN. This country is full of a bunch of idiots. They just happen to vote for Clinton, and I hate to say it, but I knew Sanders was like a false choice, and so I knew that early on before I even formulated my opinion about voting for Trump.
Brendan, I'm sorry. I have to put you on pause. Do not hang up. We're going to do 3 minutes worth of commercials, and I'm going to come right back to you. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're still talking with Brendan in San Francisco. And Brendan, can you just sort of pick up where you left off?
Well, it just seems like Trump could really do himself some good, and maybe the rest of us, if he would just pardon Snowden and that gentleman, that Navy sailor that got locked up for taking a photo, and any other, incarcerated whistleblowers that are out there, and maybe even do a public apology which would shame Obama for the stunts that he pulled on whistleblowers. I mean, he could really shed a light on this and shame the heck out of that Obama nation for the last 8 years.
Okay, well, let's put a pause on this for a moment, because the Navy sailor one was not a whistleblower. He just accidentally allowed some classified information out of his control, and he was thrown in prison for that, which just underscores the double standard when it came to Hillary, who exposed literally tens of thousands of classified U.S. State Department documents on her server, and nothing ever happened to her. In terms of Edward Snowden as a whistleblower, in terms of Julian Assange, I'm in agreement. They should be pardoned. It's not going to happen because I think Donald Trump, especially right now as he's dealing with the swamp, he's just as worried about whistleblowers as anybody else. And so it's not going to happen. But even so, I think right now the uppermost concern in the minds of the American people, whether they supported Hillary Clinton or they supported Donald Trump, is this continued reckless rush toward war in North Korea and Syria and Libya and everywhere else on the planet. I think that is uppermost in everybody's mind right now, along with the fact that Trump really doesn't seem able to do much about the coming economic crash. And everything else, even the stuff that we agree that Trump is doing right, pales in comparison to those two main problems.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, thanks for the clarification, because I do recall he did take a photo, harmlessly enough. I'll be honest with you, Mike, I'm so beaten down with all the fear-mongering over the past, since 9/11. I don't know, man. I don't know if they're gonna. They have too much skin in the game. These psychopathic money junkies. Unless they have extraterrestrial vehicles to leave this rock, they're not going to destroy it and contaminate it beyond a habitable thing for them. I mean, they're having too much fun ripping us all off.
Brendan, look back through history at people like Caligula or Nero, and realize that leaders, when they get power mad, they get drunk with the power, they get greedy, they will destroy their own cultures. It has happened many times in history. It could be happening again right now. But you're absolutely right. The addition of the nuclear element, plus along with whatever biological weapons they're playing with out there, it's hardly a new idea that World War III or World War IV might be the end of life on Earth. Look at the movie On the Beach as a good example of that.
Yeah. If it happens, it's going to be Israel doing a false flag, setting off a nuke, or shooting Trump's plane out of the air, something dramatic, and then blame, whomever they want, and then, we're their slaves, so we'll go fight their illegal wars. I can't see it. I can't see North Korea only in a defensive measure. Like you said, I agree with you 100%. And it's just ridiculous how we love to disarm these countries in a cowardice, sanctions, and then go in there and destroy them.
That's exactly what it is.
Thanks for the clarification.
Get them to give up their guns, and then you can go on in and commit genocide on them. And a little reminder for all the gun grabbers out there, the gun supporters out there, every genocide of the 20th century was preceded by the disarming of the eventual target population. And all the U.S. government is doing is applying that same practice on the scale of nations rather than individuals. Brendan, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. We're coming up here on another commercial break, and then we'll be back with more news and more phone calls after these words from our sponsors. So please stay tuned. We're going to be doing the economic news after we get back from these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're talking about the economic news now. And France has just announced 60 billion, with a B, euros of austerity cuts. And they're enforcing economic austerity. The cuts are going to come from government spending, despite the fact that France right now is in a major economic stagnation, and the French people are just, they're voicing their disapproval. They are tired of that constant message from the money junkies, you must make do with less so we can have more. You must make do with less so we can have more. You must make do with less so we can have more. And we're seeing this all over Europe, not just in France. Obviously, in Greece, we're seeing it. We saw it in Cyprus. We're seeing it in Italy and Spain. The people around the world are just fed up with this private central banking scam. We have been enslaved to it for 300 years. And enough is enough is enough. We are being ruled, controlled, looted, and plundered, and all with nothing more than ink, paper, and numbers in a computer. Now, as you know, there's a big debate going on over the minimum wage in this country. And I'm fully on board with finding some way to get working and middle-class Americans fairer compensation for their labor in order to have that capital available to pump back into the economy at the shopping malls, the car dealerships, and so forth and so on. And it is amazing that the money junkies don't seem to understand that the less you give the ordinary working people, the less they will spend, and the more the financial troubles will increase. But apparently over in St. Louis, they're going to drop their minimum wage from $10 an hour to $7.70 an hour. And that is going to be a major, major problem. We're already seeing all over the country what they're calling the retail apocalypse. And cities are already reporting a decrease in sales tax. They're trying to blame online shopping and get more taxes passed on online commerce, which would be fine. But the real problem is ordinary people do not have the money to spend, either in brick and mortar stores or online. They just don't have it. You cannot run a national economy with just a few thousand people having all the money, because there are only a few thousand of them, and they can't run to all the shopping malls and buy up all the manufactured goods. It's just not going to happen. That's really what's going on. And the money junkies can't see it because, like any other drug addict, they are oblivious to anything except where that next fix will be coming. Apparently, Bon-Ton Stores, Sears, and J. Crew lead the list of retailers with a high risk of default. Of course, Sears has been on death watch for quite a bit of time. SoundCloud just cut 40% of their staff trying to get out of the red and back into the black. It's happening all over. So let's talk about what's going on in Europe. Story coming out of the Express. European Union ministers are now seriously considering a radical shift in the immigration policy. Because of all the problems that are going on, they're going to start turning the migrant boats back to Africa, not even let them get on shore. Even the globalists appear to be blinking on this. Bill Gates is now out there saying, yeah, this has gone too far. And I know what they're thinking. They're not all of a sudden getting a sense of conscience, a guilty conscience. What it is they're realizing that this refugee influx could shatter the European Union, and that united Europe is a major stepping stone to a united planet. And so that's why they're pulling back on the refugee. They're trying to save the European Union from breaking apart. It may be too late. The globalist New World Order agenda is in serious, serious trouble right now. Apparently, the globalists over in the White House are using the National Economic Council to try and undermine President Trump's agenda. Donald Trump is trying to do what's best for the American economy, and it certainly needs all the help it can get. And these globalists are out there saying, oh, no, it's our job to take care of the rest of the world. Meanwhile, over in immigration, it's weird. France is now allowing 100 known terror suspects to own firearms. They're calling it a shocking security blunder. This after a known gun enthusiast attacked the police in Paris. And by the way, being a gun enthusiast does not make you dangerous, unless you're set up by the FBI or something like that. Speaking of being shot and gun bans, over in Chicago, which has the strictest gun laws in this country, over the 4th of July holiday weekend, 102 people were shot, 15 people killed. Thank goodness for all those gun laws that disarmed all those law-abiding citizens. Or one of these shooters, one of these assailants, one of these criminals might have been harmed. We can't let that happen. Not when you have a criminal society and a criminal government. You have to protect those street criminals. It's ridiculous here. Now, Oliver Stone has produced and Friedrich Moser has directed a new documentary called A Good American. And it is it features an NSA analyst turned whistleblower who basically is laying out the story of a terrorist monitoring system the U.S. government launched in the wake of the first World Trade Center attack. Back in the 1990s, remember the World Trade Center bombing? But for some reason, this terrorist monitoring system was shut down just weeks before 9/11 happened. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. I'm sure there's no connection with all these stand-down orders, and we don't really need this. We're going to turn this off, and we're going to make sure that all the warplanes are well away from New York and Washington on military drills. We don't need all these systems. Nothing is ever going to happen to us. Now, do you remember Hobby Lobby? They're a national franchise of hobbyist stores, and we used to have one in North Hollywood that I went to a lot. They had a lot of really cool stuff there. But they got into trouble over some hiring practices and religious discrimination, and now they're in hot water again because apparently Hobby Lobby got involved in the black market trade of artifacts looted from Iraq following the U.S. invasion. There was a lot of stuff disappeared from Iraq. The only thing the U.S. forces were protecting was the oil ministry. They left the Baghdad Museum wide open, and it got plundered. They're still trying to get all that stuff back. But apparently, Hobby Lobby has agreed to surrender thousands of these artifacts that they acquired and pay a $3 million fine to resolve this civil action the Justice Department brought against the company. Now, I understand the allure of ancient artifacts. But again, if you know they've been stolen or you suspect they've been stolen, any legitimately traded artifact is going to have a provenance trail that says this came from this location, it was put into the possession of these people who sold it to this person, who told it to this person, so forth and so on. If you ever watch American Pickers, which is a fun show, and I like to watch it because they're out there oohing and eyeing and over things I knew as a kid and saying, oh, this is worth so much money, and it's a lot of fun. I keep thinking, if only I had kept that stuff. So, I digress. They're always talking about on items that have a claim to historical importance, is there a paper trail? Because otherwise, anybody can make up any story about any object. Same thing with Pawn Stars. They're always dealing with that. If you bring in an old sword and you say it's an old sword, well, that's all well and good. If you bring in an old sword and say, this was used by Ulysses S. Grant, and this was in a recent episode of American Pickers, there's got to be some proof, and not just the guy saying, well, I absolutely trust the guy who sold this to me. That's not going to make it. And the same thing in the world of ancient artifacts. And one more warning for those of you who actually have money and are into these things. There's a lot of fraud in ancient artifacts. Because amazingly enough, in a lot of countries, there isn't actually a law against counterfeiting ancient artifacts. If you're in the United States of America and you make a copy of an American coin, that's counterfeiting, and you can and will go to jail for that. If you counterfeit ancient coins, which is a lucrative specialty in the numismatic world, there's no law against it. Consequently, when you're dealing with ancient coins, you will find a lot of fakes. Oddly enough, some of those fakes have actually turned out to be more collectible and worth more money than the original they were copied from, again, because of the history. All right, I've wandered off down that trail long enough. Apparently, resveratrol found in grapes is found to kill cancer stem cells. This is coming from researchers at Penn State Hershey Cancer Institute. They have found a potential cure for colon cancer, and they've discovered that compounds found in grapes could be effective in treating colon cancer. And the combination of resveratrol and grapeseed extract is very effective at killing colon cancer cells, and what we're learning is that these compounds are not toxic to healthy cells. And I bet this will all be bought up by the pharmaceutical industries, who will then put it on a back shelf because they make much more money off their patented chemotherapy. You would think with our modern technology that something as simple as a bearing would be a fairly robust technology. But as you know, a lot of people go through hip replacement, and apparently they're still working out the kinks where apparently these so-called metal-on-metal hip replacements, patients are being recalled for x-rays. Apparently, these people are at risk of muscle or bone damage, even blood poisoning. And I understand one of the areas of concern is that if blood is leaking into that joint and it's being ground up, you have that buildup of dead blood cells, which are necrotic and can lead to all kinds of complications. Now, when I was still working on industrial videos, we worked with a local doctor who'd come out with a really cool little system for hip replacement, and it was basically just a protective sheath on the hip bone. And it looked like it was going to work, but last I heard he's still waiting for approval on that one here. Now, one of the big scandals that we have back dealing with the Clintons is the tainted blood scandal, where Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas, and they made a deal with a blood harvesting company to go to the Arkansas prisons and harvest blood from which would be made medications for hemophilia patients. And they did not screen for illnesses like HIV. And these blood products were sent on out, and a lot of people became very sick, and the Clintons made money off of this deal. And apparently it is not confined to the United States. Over in Great Britain, at the National Health Service, secret files have revealed that patients were being given deadly contaminated blood for at least 5 years after NHS officials became aware there was a problem. Modern medicine doesn't seem concerned at all with actual health or wellness. It's just making money. Just making more money. Okay, let's see what we have here. This is a very cool story. And again, it tells you the sort of skullduggery the CIA is into. This happened all the way back in 1951, year before I was born. And over in France, there was a village that all of a sudden became plagued with hallucinations and mass insanity. And at the time, it was assumed it had been an outbreak of ergotism. Now, ergot is a mold that is specific to rye bread, and it is a powerful hallucinogen. It's even mentioned in the writings of Shakespeare. It was actually part of the mixture for what was called flying ointment. You know, the modern image of a witch on the broomstick actually originated with these women who knew herbal medicines, taking the ergot and other compounds and making this ointment, rubbing it on their broom, and then basically rubbing themselves on it to absorb the hallucinogen, and they would just have these drug trips. And that's where that originated. Of course, the modern version, they're actually up in the sky, they're properly dressed, and so forth and so on. But that's what ergot is. In high dosages, it can be very, very toxic. And at the time, in 1951 in France, it was assumed that there had been an outbreak of ergot. Well, apparently, recently declassified documents have confirmed that the CIA was conducting a test, and they basically sprayed this entire French town with LSD. And, you know, they were just playing with LSD. They were in love with it. It was at the height of MK Ultra. and they were testing it out on college students and trying to see if it could be used to control populations or used as a truth serum. And it was actually the CIA, and this was covered in History Channel's America's War on Drugs. The CIA literally triggered the LSD craze in the United States because those college kids who volunteered for this program loved the experience and said, what was this stuff? And they said, oh, it's LSD. Oh, we got to figure out how to make that stuff. That was all coming out of the CIA. If it hadn't been for the CIA's MK Ultra, there never would have been an LSD epidemic in this country. But I mean, the CIA did this to a foreign country's population. And that's the reality of the CIA. They are not the wonderful, swell bunch of people in the Tom Clancy novels or the movies. We'd like them to be. They aren't. They're mafia thugs wrapped in the American flag. They think they're above the law. The laws don't apply to them. They're guiding the future of the country. Some of the heads of these intelligence agencies, they start seeing themselves as really being the boss. J. Edgar Hoover, when he was running the FBI, used to call his office the seat of the U.S. government. And in a real way, that was true because he had the blackmail goods on all the top politicians. We'll be right back after these words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Coming up at the top of the hour here, got a few stories to talk about. We mentioned earlier in the show about ClimateGate and what's really going on. And I think we reported last week, earlier in the week, there was skiing in California at Mammoth, over at Lake Tahoe on July 4th for the first time ever. They were able to just get out there and ski on July 4th. Now, what's really going on, of course, I mean, the world was warming back in the 1990s, but human activity does not dominate the climate. That giant pulsing, fusing ball of hydrogen in the sky does. And astronomers are finally coming to realize that it does go through cycles. Now, we're all familiar with the 11-year sunspot cycle and the 22-year magnetic cycle, but we've only been able to study the sun scientifically for about 100 years, although astronomers have been keeping track of the number of sunspots longer than that, which is why we know about the Maunder minimum. But they're now starting to understand there are larger, longer-term cycles that are only just now beginning to repeat, and so that we know that they're there. And 3 of these cycles are lining up on the low point over the next few years. They're calling it the super minimum, the super solar minimum. And that's what's really going on. Now, we're all kind of jumping around and looking at Michael Mann with his little fraudulent hockey stick, and he's up there in the court in Canada. Apparently, a Canadian climatologist, Dr. Tim Ball, was calling global warming a fraud. It's a hoax, just like Donald Trump. And Michael Mann tried to sue him, but it's backfired on him horribly because the court said, okay, show us your raw data on which you based a reasonable, realistic conclusion that there was a hockey stick. And Michael Mann has refused. And he is now at risk of contempt of court charges and a finding for the defendant in this case, and it's going to be a huge embarrassment. Now, there's been a new study out. This is being reported in principiascientific.org. And it's a peer-reviewed study that tried to validate current surface temperature data sets managed by NASA, NOAA, and the UK Met Office. And it discovered all of them are making adjustments to the raw temperature data. And the excuse is always that, well, we have to correct for biases in the data. Well, if you're just reading a thermometer, where is the bias? And the study found that all of these adjustments to correct for the bias were always toward the warmer end. And these adjustments by these government agencies account for nearly all of the claimed warming in the recent climate data. They're still fudging the records out there. Over at Breitbart.com, they've got Dillingpole out there saying exactly the same thing. If you look at the way they're handling the data, they are still handling the data. They're rigging it. They're still trying to sell you that humans are warming the earth. We'll be right back after station break. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Just feel free to call on in with your comments and questions and so forth as we get to the bottom of the show today here. So we're talking about climate fakery, hoaxery, and again, the data you are being shown by the corporate media to prove that you icky-poo human beings are warming the planet, it's all fraud. It's all a fake. And every time you try and go back to the original raw data sets, they throw roadblocks in the way. At Hadley Climate Research Unit, which had the data on which Michael Mann supposedly based his hockey stick, their excuse was they didn't have enough room for the raw data on the computer, so they had just thrown it away. Well, I mean, come on. How much is a USB hard drive? You can get them terabyte sizes for a couple of $100. And again, all of this behavior by the global warming adherents is at odds with scientific method. And scientific method exists because scientists recognize that they are frail, fallible, corruptible human beings. And so scientific method is a set of procedures that are followed to take that corruptible human element out of the process. And one of those key principles is reproducibility. If you conduct an experiment and you write a paper about it, I should be able to read your paper, conduct the exact same experiment, and reproduce the result. If I cannot reproduce the result, there's a problem somewhere. If somebody is out there saying the world is warming and I can't show you the raw data so you can verify it for yourself, there's a real problem out there. Now, on that issue of corruptible science, there's been this series, I think it's coming to an end, called Genius, about Albert Einstein, which has actually been a very accurate telling of both the ups and downs of his life, including his private life, which was less than wonderful. But he has this nemesis in there who is out there just absolutely trying to claim that relativity is a fantasy, not on the basis of having actually gone in and found problems with the equations, but because of just personal animosity. So that stuff really happens, and that's why we have scientific method. And anybody who's not following scientific method, you know there's a problem. What's going on is religion is failing as a controller of the people. In the good old days, the king would share what he wanted to do with the priests, and the priests would turn around and say, God wants you all to do what the king desires. And the masses would say, oh, yes, we dare not oppose the gods. Well, that doesn't really work all that well anymore. More and more people don't have faith. They don't believe in the imaginary playmates in the sky. And so governments are now turning to scientists. So you've got this guy up there, and instead of a white priest's robe, he's wearing a white lab coat. Instead of the Bible, he's holding a clipboard. And he's saying the same thing. You know, just take my word for it and believe what the ruler wants you to believe. And the masses say, oh, we dare not go up against the word of science. They're using science like it's another religion, and it isn't. The two are, in fact, completely opposite. But that's what's going on. And this idea that all of climate change is the fault of humans is, of course, completely nonsense. And apparently scientists from the University of Exeter went over to study the environmental effects caused by the Holuhraun eruption in Iceland in 2014 and 2015. And they discovered that that one single eruption put out more aerosols, sulfur dioxide, than all of the 28 countries in Europe combined. And that is the reality. Geothermal puts more of these greenhouse gases out there than all the human activity. You want to know what's really funny? One of the places where they measure CO2 content of the atmosphere that Al Gore has relied on very heavily over the years is down on the Big Island, on the top of the Mauna Loa volcano. Now, that Mauna Loa Peak is upslope from the active volcano fields down at Kilauea, Chain of Craters Road, all the way down into the ocean under to Loihi. That's where the hot spot is right now. What do volcanoes emit? Carbon dioxide. So, does it make sense to be measuring atmospheric carbon dioxide on the top of a volcano that is pouring carbon dioxide into the atmosphere? Not really. But they go where the data is going to go. Remember how they were claiming budgetary constraints? They were shutting down temperature monitoring stations in all the rural, cooler areas where the abundance of green plants were absorbing sunlight, using it to photosynthesize. And rural areas are always cooler than the urban environment, which is all concrete and asphalt, and the sunlight gets reflected back and converted to heat. It's called the urban heat island effect. And they wanted the temperatures to go up, so they stopped measuring temperatures where the temperatures were cooler. It's a scam. It's just been a scam. All right, we're going to say hello to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We're talking about the global warming hoax, various other things here. And that's what it was. It was a hoax. It still is a hoax. They're still pushing it. We seem to have a nation of the scammers, by the scammers, and for the scammers. So, as Keith from Montana mentioned, they had a pretty solid earthquake up there in Montana. And it was felt 30 miles away, actually further than that. We're getting reports. It was a 5.8 earthquake, which is very unusual for that part of the country. Down in Los Angeles, 5.8, that's okay. But this was 6 miles southeast of Lincoln, and they had an aftershock of 4.9, and followed by another series of 7 other smaller quakes, magnitude 3 to 4, so forth and so on. Now, the epicenters of all these quakes are about 150 miles northwest of the Yellowstone supervolcano. But you've probably heard over the last couple of weeks that there's been a swarm of something like 800 little tiny earthquakes, all in an area to the northwest of the Yellowstone caldera. And if you start at the Yellowstone caldera heading northwest, that area with the quake swarm is on the same bearing as the big quake in Montana this morning. So a lot of people are getting very nervous. Nobody's actually documented a supervolcano eruption in human history. We know they've happened, but the people who were really close to them didn't file a report. And so they don't know how much warning there could be if there's a supervolcano eruption. And they're a little bit nervous about that, because supervolcanoes, those are really serious events. We're talking about something on the order of 20 to 100 times the size of Mount St. Helens. And we all remember what Mount St. Helens looked like. Yellowstone is not the only area of concern, because over in Campi Flegrei, which is in the Mediterranean near to Naples, there's another submerged supervolcano that scientists seem to, they're alarmed. It's showing a lot more activity. Apparently it last erupted in 1538, although that was a minor eruption only lasting for 8 days. But when it first blew up 39,000 years ago, it threw lava and rocks literally hundreds of kilometers away from what was the most violent eruption in the past 200,000 years in Europe. Some of these supervolcanoes are amazing. Yellowstone appears to be the largest, but there are others around the Earth. There's Toba over there in the Western Pacific. And one characteristic of a supervolcano is it doesn't leave a cone behind it. That's why it took so long to figure out what was going on. If you have a cone left behind, that's a small volcano. The supervolcanoes are explosive, and they literally blast out a hole in the ground into which dirt will fill back in, or water. There's the islands of Santorini in the Mediterranean, which are thought to be the remains of a massive volcanic eruption, which may have actually led to the story of the Great Plagues of Egypt, when you look at what comes out of a volcano and what it can do. So they're worried about this one over there in Naples. And it's kind of amazing to hear Al Gore and all of his people go on and on about plastic bags and tin cans while they're oblivious to what the planet Earth itself is really capable of doing when it lets go. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Tom in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day, Michael. Yeah, I was just watching the news, and a very great speech that Donald Trump gave about Europe. And he's telling the European countries that they got to keep their culture at all costs. So I think that was a great plus for the world. But what I do want to talk about what's going on with these Democrats trying to pump up Puerto Rico to be a state, and so they'll have more, electoral votes for the Democrat Party. I think the Republicans do that, they're committing suicide. And I do believe this DACA has to end, and there should be no sanctuary at all against the federal government, Michael. And Trump's got to put his foot down and say, nope. Can't have this.
I absolutely agree.
So
I mean, all these people with sanctuary cities and assisting the illegal immigrants, they're already in violation of Title VIII. These people should be arrested, removed from office, and thrown into jail. And now that the globalists are backing off on the open borders thing, I'm hoping that some of these people in the U.S. will back off. But again, they're using the illegal immigrants to rig the elections. Don't forget that video that came on out just a day ago, where not only were millions of illegal immigrants being registered across America, they were actually being paid to vote for Hillary Clinton. Not a lot, but a little bit.
Well, Michael, you're absolutely right. But listen, also, Donald Trump did win the popular vote because they're already talking now. These states are not getting to the real truth about the election. And Donald Trump did win the popular vote. And, when that really hit, how come the news, CNN, all these communist news networks are never going to tell you that, the Bolsheviks? Because their modus operandi is to destroy the white power structure in this country. That's all there is to it. I don't care what anybody says. That's what I feel. That's what I know. That's exactly what's going on in this country. They're trying to wipe out the white European power base, and that's what they're doing in Europe, and they're doing it here. And they're trying to do a great job of it, but unfortunately, people woke up en masse because of the Internet. And you know what, Michael, it ain't going to stop it now because they can't put the genie back in the bottle. And you know what? As far as this goes with Trump doing over in Europe, he's going to expose the whole truth. And I believe Putin, who he is going to help him. Because Putin, if you want to know, Michael, is a nationalist. Very nationalistic, Putin.
Oh, yeah, that's...
And right there, yes, and Putin is very wealthy, too. Like, he's actually wealthier than Trump, I believe. And Putin is going to go along with Trump, and he's going to expose a lot of this stuff. I believe it's already happening. I believe with they're talking now, there's 1 million people in these sanctuary cities that are going to try to turn voters so they can vote in the 2018 election. That's exactly what they're trying to do, turn 1 million of these illegals, give them sanctuary, and then somehow rig the system where they can turn them into voters, and they're all 99% of them are going to vote Democrat. This is all about the vote, Michael. It's nothing. This whole thing is a conspiracy of biblical proportion as far as all these illegals coming here. They're not coming here to compliment Michael. They're coming to eat the lunch, take the jobs, and guess what? You want to take your government back? You tell a lot of white Americans to go back and get jobs in the federal government. That's how you take your government back. You put them to work in the federal government, Michael.
Yeah, but unfortunately...
You hire them in the county jobs, you hire them in the federal government, the state jobs. You put white Americans back to work. Michael, there's like you're saying a long time ago, I remember you said it, there's almost 50 million white Americans not working in this country. They gave up. They felt beat down. They just quit because they felt their government betrayed them. So, now that this is being exposed by Trump, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle. There's no way. It's all exposed. And the Communist News Network, the CBS broadcasting, Communist broadcasting system, and all these fake news outlets, they're all been exposed. Now, the thing is, where we're getting beat down, Michael, is on these college campuses by a bunch of lily whites who don't have, like I said, never had a calf on their hand. You got a lot of white American kids, young adults that never had hard knocks. They never knew what was to live on peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. They've always been here, free, everything's free. And until they have an awakening, they're going to be kind of liberal. You're like a hippie, like the hippies back in the 60s, So I just, what I see in Trump's speech today, Michael, I hope you get the chance to see it. He gave a heck of a speech. I just listened about 15 minutes of it. It was really good. And he's talking about Europeans got to keep their culture because they're invading it with the Muslims. Let's not kid ourselves, Michael. This is all by design by guys like Soros, the Zog agents, Michael. That's all I can tell you. This is Zog agents.
Well, the problem with wanting to get more white people back into the federal government is the federal government does impose race-based quota hiring. And that, of course, it's still racism. It's just racism in reverse. As far as
it's affirmative action, Michael. It's affirmative action. That's exactly what it is. Affirmative action.
Okay, Tom.
That's my opinion.
Tom, calm down. Calm down. Okay, let me get in here a little bit.
I'm sorry.
The issue with the illegal elections, when somebody asks to see your ID to drive a car, nobody screams racism. If you have to show your ID to buy alcohol, nobody screams racism. There are so many areas of activity in the country where you're required to show your ID, and nobody screams you're being a racist when you ask to see the ID, except when it's for voting. And then all of a sudden they scream, it's racism, you're disenfranchising voters. No, we just want to make sure they're legally qualified to vote by being a citizen who's supposed to be here. The only racism aspect is if they're illegal immigrants from Central and South America, in which case they're not supposed to be voting anyway.
Correct. Michael, did you see the statistics in Chicago over the weekend?
Oh, I sure did.
Maybe you can talk about that a little bit after I hang up, but yeah, that's unbelievable what's going on in Chicago. And they have some of the strictest gun laws in the United States, if not the strictest. And you got that Rahm Emanuel, and that you got these guys like Rahm Emanuel and Podesta and all these I don't know what you call them, Wiccans. I don't know what they are. It's unbelievable what's going on in our cities, and it's just amazing what's happening in the United States. But you know what? Trump saved the day. I believe it. The speech he gave today,
okay,
Michael,
you're starting to break up here. Okay, Tom, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. We already did cover the shooting statistics up there in Chicago, and it's a reminder: when law-abiding citizens are allowed to be armed, crime goes down. Every single study on the link between crime and an armed populace shows the same thing. An armed society is much safer than a disarmed society. Chicago proves that. All right, we're going to go to Sherry in Texas. Aloha, Sherry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, two things. There's people that think that the Bible is referencing a Third World War by different passages and this and that. But there's other people who think that that is referring to, instead, a worldwide event like a supervolcano, that the big worldwide event will actually be a Mother Nature type event. That's one thing I wanted to point out. They don't all think it's going to be for a war, like this country against that country, but more like an event. I've heard it said both ways, so I'm just going to throw that in there. Also, you talk about a lot of things about science. You're talking about the science of mass and form. I just want to point out, too, that there's a science of energy, which is physics, and there's a quantum physicist named David Bohm, B-O-H-M, and you can Google him, DuckDuckGo him, and look him up and everything if you want to. And he believes that we live in a non-local reality and our minds are not separate from the world, and this is sort of an Easter type religious belief. But he provided a holographic model of the universe, and a lot of other physicists use that model to test their theories and things like that. So there's a whole other science there, which is the science of energy, or chi, or ch. Well, it's
okay. You're kind of.
But I'm not going to go there.
Yeah, I would appreciate you not doing that, because you're pulling a bunch of buzzwords from what are very disparate disciplines. And yes, the science of energy is physics, and to a physicist, matter and energy are simply two aspects of the same exact stuff. And when you get into the world of quantum mechanics, and that's something that I'm just barely scratching the surface on right now, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But again,
it is fun.
You have to be very careful that there are scientists out there who are also religious, and they try and justify their religion by claiming their science proves it, and then you're getting into a very intellectually dishonest area.
Yeah.
Science is what can be reproduced and demonstrated repeatedly, not just a feeling on the part of the scientist. Sherry, we're going to let you go. We got to get a commercial break here, then we got more phone calls waiting after the commercial break. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go back to the phones. Holly in Missouri. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, I just wanted to mention baby Charlie. This particular story is killing me because although it's in Britain, we sort of have we have the sword of Damocles hanging over us with our government health care, and you know that our government enjoys playing war games so much, and I realize what I'm saying is a total fallacy, but somebody needs to bust that baby out of the hospital, because I don't think we can have technocrats decreeing who will live and who will die. And I think if it's allowed anywhere, you know, it's going to spread like wildfire.
Okay, I have to admit, I'm not up on the story of baby Charlie. Just give us a brief précis. What's going on here?
Basically, I didn't do a deep research, but he was born and he has a rare condition, and the parents in Britain, I don't know how they got the money. They probably crowdfunded it, and they have money to take him to America for an experimental treatment, and they were denied. The Pope offered to do treatment as well in Italy. That was just denied today, and they say that the baby must die. And I just wanted to mention that because I don't want to go down that road. Period. End of discussion. I was damaged by a defective product myself. Managed to get myself to 85% of my capacity. Was damaged by more defective humans with MD behind their name, and I have no respect at this point. I do understand, you know, the scientific method, but I don't think it's been being followed.
With regard to what?
Much of anything, quite frankly.
Well, I would agree with you on that, but it seemed like a kind of a broad generalization. I'm looking at a story here right now where basically the European Court of Human Rights is basically saying the hospital can discontinue life support for this baby, and apparently it's going to be switched off tomorrow. Apparently the Pope is issuing a Vatican passport so the parents can try and get this kid down there. But yeah, it's turning into a big, big controversy. And I wish it was a black and white issue, but the question is the baby viable? I mean, is it going to someday be able to survive off the life support? And if the answer is no, then what kind of a life can he look at? And it's a complex issue, and it's like all these people are kept in persistent vegetative states as long as the money holds up.
But I disagree. I think it's a slippery slope. Basically, they have the money, and it's their child, and if they want to do an experimental treatment, if you live in a free world, they can do it. And also, I don't recall which state, but there's at least one state in the country that has the insurance company is trying to deny treatment for people who are terminally ill. And I also think if you're an adult and you want treatment for your terminal illness, I think you have the right to do that, and they're already trying to shut that off. And I'm sorry I can't name the state.
I think
it's a slippery.
It is, and I know there was this big stink about a month ago where these health insurance providers were prevailing on the doctors to recommend euthanasia to extremely aged patients or those with a terminal disease as a cost-saving measure.
Well, I just wanted to say that I think that I got hurt by people who were playing God, and I think in some cases they bought into products without using their brains that were prepackaged that should have never been allowed into the market. And I don't think that playing God ever got, and also not fully, there's a lot of stuff going on that involves slick marketing without actually giving people all the facts before they use something, and they also don't.
And now the FDA is already talking about they're going to end those little warnings on the TV commercials for prescription medication at the end. You know, use of this disease, use of this medication can cause these. Those are going to go away. on the assumption that nobody's paying attention to them anyway, which is nonsense. It's just all about protecting the profits of the pharmaceutical industry. Holly, we're going to have to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Got more callers waiting on the line when we get back. Aloha, America. Welcome to our show here. We're going to go back to the telephones now to James in Portland. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, yesterday one of your callers brought up platinum and fuel cell.
Yes.
And I just wanted to make a comment on the progress that's been made. The original fuel cell cars by the major Japanese companies used about 90 grams or 3 ounces of platinum. The latest cars that are now driving around California are using around 30 grams or 1 ounce of platinum. And the next generation stacks that are under development by GM and Honda, who have partnered, are said to use only 5 to 7 grams, which is about the same that's in every catalytic converter in every petrol car on the market.
Well, that would certainly explain the drop in demand and price for platinum then.
And also the tanks, you were concerned about the storage of gaseous hydrogen, and these tanks that are now storing hydrogen for these fuel cell cars that are driving around California have been tested, and they require a 50 caliber bullet just to pierce them. I think you'd be quite amazed. You can see videos and get more information on. There's a video of this exact experiment on YouTube. And also, I wanted to bring up the fact that
before you go any further on that one, my issue was not gaseous hydrogen. We know that can be kept contained in a tank. It was if they were going with a cryogenic hydrogen, that is much more difficult to contain in any kind of a tank.
I see. All the cars right now are using gaseous hydrogen at 10,000 psi, and I also wanted to bring up the fact that Germany right now it's already undergone testing, and they're building hydrogen trains. They don't need a pantograph or overhead wires or any of that stuff, and they plan to have these on the rails transporting people at the end of this year or early next year, as many as 40 of them, and that's to go with their hydrogen submarine that they've already got. And they're also working on hydrogen airplanes. And another application for this technology is drones. And hydrogen drones, you don't have the weight of the lithium batteries, and you can stuff the frame with the actual fuel. And the hydrogen, as you well know, is buoyant, so you get the double advantage of the more fuel you have in the drone itself, the lighter it is. And
no, that's a fallacy, because if the hydrogen is being held under pressure, then its density is going to go up. If the hydrogen were the same pressure as the outside atmosphere, that would be true. But if you're under 10,000 psi pressure, then I imagine you're going to have a very high dense amount of hydrogen. It's going to be heavier than air at that point.
Well, these drones the drones that I'm speaking of are under 5,000. I'm not aware of any under 10 yet, but in any event, I hear what you're saying. But these hydrogen drones are getting 4 hours plus of uptime, which beats the current lithium battery drones by a magnitude. So that's the future. And I was wondering, just one last thing, right down there on Cook Street in Honolulu, one of the best hydrogen advocates and most knowledgeable hydrogen advocates in the world, his name is Stan Osserman. He works for the Hawaii Center for Advanced Transportation Technologies. And I'm sure that he would love to talk to you and your listeners about this and the incredible things that are going on every day with this hydrogen tech. It's really astounding what is happening. And
I'll have to pay a visit to the man here. I have one question right now. Right now, there are so few hydrogen cars, hydrogen trains, and so forth. Unlike automobiles that are fueled on gasoline, where we have a huge infrastructure of pipes and refineries, if we start really developing hydrogen technology, which I think would be a really good idea, at some point we have to ask the question, where is all the hydrogen going to come from, and what is going to be the cost to produce it compared to the current petroleum-based technology?
Well, there's a company in Utah, and I'm not sure if you'd like me to mention the name or not, but if anyone just Googles hydrogen truck, there's a company in Utah that is building right now. They've got a prototype, and they introduced it last December. And it's a hydrogen Class 8 semi-truck, and that's enough. That's pretty good right there. But what this company plans to do is to build 375 solar-powered hydrogen stations across the United States and southern Canada. And they calculate that they will be able to sell this solar hydrogen-produced the solar-produced hydrogen at $3.50 a kilogram. And this takes us back to sub-$1 gas, because hydrogen is about twice as efficient when you're using it for transportation like that in a fuel cell. And so we're looking at, if this company is successful, and if, you know, like I say, you can find more information if you don't want me to mention the name by just Googling hydrogen truck. It's made a big news, and if they can do this, this will be the biggest thing to ever happen to transportation, and it's all domestically produced. These stations, because once you paid for the panels and the equipment, the electricity is then free. And by the way, just in the last couple of weeks...
Hold it before you leap on here. The electricity is not, or rather the hydrogen is not free, and the electricity is not free because there's going to be maintenance on these. And the other problem I foresee is that if, for example, half of all the cars and trucks in the United States were converted to hydrogen, just off the top of my head, I see a problem of literally running out of room for these solar-powered hydrogen-producing stations.
Well, they've done, on the website, if people find it, they've done the calculations, and they're ready to announce the location of the first 8 stations here in the next month or so.
All right.
And so this is going to be astounding, and I understand your point about it not being free, but once the equipment is paid for, the electricity that comes out of those panels is effectively free. And California, in the last week, this is in the LA Times, California solar plants produce so much power that California had to pay Arizona to take the excess. And so instead of paying another state to take this excess, they're working so well. I don't know if when the last time you drove up through the Central Valley of California, but it's changed a lot, and there's a lot of solar plants there. And so instead of paying another state to take this excess energy, you crank up electrolyzers and you make hydrogen with it. Before I understand, you've got to let me go, but I'd like to really, this gentleman's name is Stan Osserman, and he's got plenty of videos. All you have to do is search Stan Osserman Hydrogen, and you can see him, and he'd love to come on your show and talk to your listeners. I think you'd really be amazed. He's much more knowledgeable than I am about this stuff, and he's hands-on right down there on Cook Street in Honolulu, and he really could. I think you'd find what he has to say very interesting.
Well, I'm certainly going to look them up, and in the long run, I think hydrogen power or electric power is going to be the way to go. The problem is that every time we hear about one of these wonderful ideas, there's always a big gaping hole, and that is on the front end of, providing the raw materials on a scale sufficient to support a society of our size. And every time somebody talks about we can solve all of our problems with solar cells, the first thing I start thinking about is the solar cell footprint and, how much room are we really going to have? Because the more solar cells you put on up, then you're blocking light that's getting to the ground, and that's going to have an impact on agriculture and so forth. So anyway, I will look them up, and yes, I do need to let you go because we're running out of time here, and we're going to switch over here to James in Atlanta. James, thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind today?
Mike, I had a question about the voter ID. There's 2 questions. If you are aware of how many people actually don't have an ID in America, and then if it's a real problem, why hasn't any of the politicians done any type of seminars or anything to help people get an ID? They always bring up the fact that people that are having a hard time voting, but you never see them, trying to solve a problem and help people without an ID get one. So
Well, I mean, it's not that difficult. I mean, here in the state of Hawaii, and I think the thing is, it's true in every one of the states. Even if you're not going to drive, the state will give you a state-approved ID card where you go on in, prove who you are, prove that you're a legal American citizen. You get a plastic card that will be what you show to buy alcohol, so forth and so on. So I don't understand this idea about why it's difficult to get an ID card. It really isn't if you are a legal American citizen. If you're not a legal American citizen, then it is a problem to get an ID card, and you shouldn't have one.
But none of the politicians that always bring that point, are you aware that they've ever tried to solve that problem and try to help people that are disenfranchised? It just seems like they bring the point, but they haven't tried to solve it.
No, what they're trying to do is get rid of the requirement for a voter ID so they can use people who are not legally entitled to vote to swing the outcome of an election, as happened last year.
So it seems like they're really not trying to fix the problem. They're just trying to drive a wedge.
No, they're not trying to fix the problem. To some extent, we have to understand that a large number of people who are holding political office in this country are holding it because the system is crooked and easy to rig. They're not going to want to change a darn thing, or they'll be out of a job next election.
I just feel sorry for anybody that doesn't have an ID, and it seemed like if they really cared about it, they would try to help straighten it out.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, thank you very much for that. And real quick, I'm looking at my email. Somebody wrote on in and corrected me regarding the skiing on July 4th. Apparently, it has happened before on Mammoth Mountain. Rarely. It's only Tahoe where it was the first time in history. Somebody else wrote in to say that they're able to achieve better storage of hydrogen at much lower pressures using metal hydride than the normal high-pressure vessels. And, yeah, that's all well and good. But, again, the front end, how do you produce the hydrogen in enough volume to service all of the transportation needs of an entire country? That's a big question mark for me. Now, if we could accomplish fusion power, then the solution is obvious. We take those offshore oil drilling platforms, we put fusion reactors on the top of them, suck up the seawater, break it into hydrogen and oxygen, problem solved. That would be a way to go. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
It's the Breitbart article on manipulating the data, adjusting the temperatures, of course, to skew towards warming and their agenda. And actually what that is, of course, we know that's not scientific method, but that's definitely the opposite.
It's propaganda.
What that actually is political science. In a different aspect of political science. That's exactly what that is. It's adjusting, that's political science for their agenda. And a comment to Holly there, she's got a big heart, I can tell, but I can tell you my experience in medicine, 23 years, I see you, she talks about playing God. We're playing God when we don't allow God to take the patient away quite often. I've seen so many patients vegetative, and we have quite a team of people that come to the family and tell them the status, and they don't want to listen a lot of times. So we give them time to kind of absorb all the information. And at some point in time, we've done the apnea testing on the ventilator, and we've done EEGs and checked the amplitude, and cold caloric testing to check brainstem activity. We've done everything. We've got a whole protocol to pretty much indicate, vegetative state. And at some point in time, when families say, no, I want everything done still, you talk about quality versus quantity. If your heart can still keep beating, but you're vegetative in your mind, your head, your neurostatus vegetative, that's a really sad thing to see happen, and people live the rest of their lives in a vegetative state in a nursing home, getting bed sores, urinary tract infections, sepsis, and then they find basically pneumonias and dying. It's a very, very bad way to go. So I say when she's talking about playing God, I think we go a little ways out to give it time, and then we finally say, well, it is what it is. We're sorry, but this is the current situation. And then we take it to an ethics committee, and the ethics committee looks it over, and there's a lot of physicians on there, and they look over all the data, everything, and then they present it again to the family. And then, the family says, I still want everything done. Quite often times we'll do, but then we'll stabilize, and then we'll find some kind of skilled nursing facility that will take the patient if they're on a ventilator, and they'll live the rest of their lives out in a nursing home and to die there at the nursing home in a very bad situation. And sometimes we've actually, they've taken to court to say, you need to stop. You really do. And it's sad, like I said, to see a person.
Yeah, but in this particular case, Holly's concern was that the British medical establishment didn't seem to go through all of that. They just arbitrarily said this kid's life isn't worth anything, and we're going to pull the life support off. And the other issue that I raised, of course, was the recent story about how health insurance providers in the United States are encouraging doctors to convince terminally ill and very old patients to just accept euthanasia in order to save the health insurance companies money. And it seems like the playing of God is going a little bit in both directions. And obviously, if you are getting on in years, you should write out a living will that says what you want done. We discovered here in Hawaii, for example, I always joke about donating my body to medical science because medical students can always use a good laugh. And I found out that if I had died when I had my recent illness, Claire would not have been able to do that. They would have forced her to just get a regular conventional funeral, which is hideously expensive. We don't have that kind of money. And so you have to literally write out that document ahead of time and sign it and get it notarized saying, yeah, when I am dead, just ship me off. You reuse my organs if any of them are still viable, and ship the rest over to a medical school, and they'll stuff me and mount me in a pose that represents my natural environment, with all these blown out computers all around my feet or something.
Well, Mike, you'd be really surprised how many people will step in even when you have a DNR, do not resuscitate order, and a family member, you'll have 5 people in a family, and everybody's on board to say, okay, we're going to recognize Dad's wishes, and you have that one person that doesn't and fights it, and the whole system gets tossed into legalities. It's terrible, and we never get to follow through right away with the wishes of the patient. It's really bad. It's not as cut and dry as you think it is, unfortunately. It should be. The wishes
no,
should be
I know it isn't, because I've seen it up close and personal myself a couple of times, and it's one of the reasons why I'm glad I didn't go into the medical profession. I don't have the emotionality for it. The first time I lost a patient, that would be it. I'd be out, and that's where I would be with that. Much better to be an astronomer. If a star dies, who cares, right?
I agree.
Okay. All right, listen.
Hey, thanks, Michael.
We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the last segment of our program today on this Thursday, and we've got a couple of stories from the world of computers before we sign off. Apparently, this most recent ransomware attack that went all over the place was, in fact, hitting hospitals. It hit 2 hospitals in Pennsylvania, shut down the computer network at a hospital in West Virginia. Surgeries had to be delayed. Their computer networks were destroyed. I mean, we're talking about people's lives at risk from all of this ransomware, and absolutely nothing whatsoever from the NSA about any of this stuff. Meanwhile, of course, NATO is still out there insisting that this most recent ransomware was not really ransomware, but a cyber attack by a state sponsor, and they're promising retaliation. We all know who they're going to blame for this. Even though the ransomware emerged out of Ukraine, they're going to say, somehow it's Russia, somehow it's Russia. Now, if you have an Android device, you need to be aware there is a new malware out there called Copycat. It disguises itself as a popular Android app that you download from third-party stores. And once downloaded, the malware starts collecting data about the infected device and downloads rootkits to help root these Android smartphones. And it deliberately removes all the security defenses from the device and injects code into the Zygote app launching process to fraudulently install apps and display ads and generate revenue. So this is really epidemic out there. And for example, on my website, there are 3 pop-unders. If you're getting pop-overs and you're getting a lot more ads, then you've got one of these devices out there. And what's really amazing is how many people are willing to advertise with these essentially criminal operations who are making money off of other people's work, other people's websites. Well, we become a nation of the scammers, by the scammers, and for the scammers. And nothing illustrates that more than apparently how the lotteries have been exposed as rigged in Wisconsin, Colorado, Kansas, and Oklahoma. And they're talking about this one individual who managed to win $783,000 in payouts and then went on this financial thing to basically shelter it from taxes. And ultimately scammed the U.S. government for $150,000 and $36,000 more from Wisconsin in tax refunds on the lottery payout. And to get the payout, he had this programmer, Eddie Tipson, who's former security director for the Multi-State Lottery Association, rigged the December 29th, 2007 Megabucks lottery. It's all a fake and a fraud. And speaking of which, Google is spending $800,000 on a bot system to provide 20,000 articles a month, 30,000 articles automated to local newspapers and bloggers. They're just going to churn out the fill so they don't have to report on any kind of the real news out there. And finally, apparently Facebook has 83 million fake users, about 8.7 of all active accounts. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here. We'll be back tomorrow here on Republic Broadcasting, Friday. Not sure yet if the lovely Lady Claire will be able to join us or not. We'll fill you in at the start of the show tomorrow. Take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Aloha, America.